The metallic hiss of the blast doors echoed through the vast Galactic Council chamber like a death knell. But Ambassador Jake Martinez didn't flinch. His polished dress uniform, Mirth's finest military regalia, seemed almost quaint against the impossible architecture surrounding him. Crystalline walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, while gravity fields shifted to accommodate species that defied every law of physics humanity thought they understood. Behind Jake, Dr. Emily Harrison's knuckles had turned white as she gripped humanity's membership application.
That's 3 years.
3 years of sleepless nights, diplomatic missions, and painstaking documentation of every human achievement, from the first cave paintings to faster-than-light travel. Her breath caught as she surveyed the assembled representatives' beings that looked like living nightmares and impossible dreams all at once. The chamber itself was a testament to galactic power. Floating platforms held creatures of pure energy that flickered between dimensions, while towering beings with exoskeletons like living diamonds cast prismatic shadows across the floor. In the center, a massive holographic display showed Earth's pathetic little solar system, insignificant in the vast tapestry of galactic civilization. Pathetic, sneered Counselor Vexstar, her 6 arms gesturing dismissively at the display. Each of her limbs moved with predatory grace, ending in claws that could shred steel. Her voice carried the authority of a species that had conquered star systems while humans were still discovering fire. No natural weapons, no telepathic abilities, no extended lifespans. These humans are barely evolved beyond their primitive ancestors. Jake felt his jaw muscles tighten, but he forced himself to remain still. This was Earth's moment, their one chance to join the galactic community as equals rather than subjects. The weight of 8 billion human souls pressed down on his shoulders like a physical force. The holographic display shifted, showing humanity's greatest achievements. The first moon landing, the development of fusion power, the colonization of Mars, the breakthrough in faster-than-light communication. To human eyes, these were miraculous leaps forward. To the Council, they were the fumbling steps of children, playing with toys.
Look at this,
Vexstar continued, her voice dripping with disdain. They celebrate reaching their own moon. My species was traversing galaxies when these creatures were still living in caves. They've managed to visit a handful of worlds in their own system, and they think this qualifies them for membership in the most advanced civilization in the known universe. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber like a wave of contempt. A being that resembled liquid mercury in a vaguely humanoid shape pulsed with what Jake could only interpret as amusement. Another representative, a creature that stood 15 feet tall, with skin like polished obsidian, let out a sound that might have been laughter if it hadn't been so utterly alien. But here's the thing about humans, and this is where the Council made their first fatal mistake. When you corner a human, when you humiliate them in front of their peers, when you tell them they're not good enough, something primal awakens. Something that had driven humanity from the caves to the stars in just a few thousand years. Jake's hands clenched into fists at his sides, but his voice remained steady. Honorable Council, if you would allow me to explain. Explain what? Vexstar's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. That your species has somehow overcome their fundamental limitations? That you've developed telepathic abilities in the past century? That you've extended your pathetic lifespans beyond a single century? That you've learned to manipulate matter at the quantum level? The silence that followed was deafening. The truth was, humanity hadn't done any of those things. They were still the same species that had been fighting wars with sticks and stones just a few millennia ago. They were still bound by the same biological limitations that had defined them since they first stood upright on the African savanna. Your application is denied, Vexstar announced coldly, her 6 arms folding across her chest in a gesture of finality. Return when your species has something meaningful to contribute to galactic civilization. Perhaps in a few thousand years, evolution will have corrected some of your more obvious deficiencies. The chamber erupted in alien laughter, clicking, chittering, and sounds that made Jake's skin crawl. It was the sound of predators dismissing prey, of gods mocking mortals, of a cosmic joke that humanity wasn't even smart enough to understand. Emily felt her heart sink as she watched the council representatives begin to disperse. 3 years of work dismissed in 3 minutes. But then she saw Jake's face, and her fear transformed into something else entirely. Because Jake wasn't looking defeated. He was looking dangerous. As the massive doors began to seal behind them, Emily grabbed his arm. "Jake, we can't let this stand. They just signed humanity's death warrant. Without council protection, we're sitting ducks for every raider and slaver in the galaxy." Jake looked back at the towering spires of the council station. His fists clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. The station stretched impossibly high, defying gravity and physics in ways that made human engineering look like a child's building blocks. In that moment, as he stared at the symbol of galactic power, something shifted in his expression. "No, Emily," he said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that made her step back. "They just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. You see, what the Council failed to realize, what their advanced civilizations and millennia of experience had somehow missed, was that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology. It wasn't their lifespan or their telepathic abilities or their natural weapons. It was something far more dangerous, their ability to turn humiliation into absolute determination." The walk back to their shuttle was silent, but Emily could feel the change in Jake like a physical force. This wasn't the same man who had walked into that chamber with hope and diplomacy. This was something else entirely, something that had been forged in the fires of cosmic rejection and tempered by the laughter of gods. As their shuttle pulled away from the council station, Jake stared out at the stars with eyes that had seen the future. And in that future, he saw fire. The council had just taught humanity the most valuable lesson in galactic history, that strength was the only currency the universe respected. And humanity, despite their limitations, had always been exceptional. Students, the age of human diplomacy was over. The age of human determination was about to begin. Speaking of determination and the power of consistent effort over time,
Yes.
that's exactly what drives exponential growth in every aspect of life. If you want to discover how small, consistent actions can lead to extraordinary results, check out our next video about the incredible power of compounding it. The same principle that's about to transform humanity's place in the galaxy. Tactical display on the bridge of the Retribution pulsed with angry red dots as Captain Mike Thompson watched death approach New Austin. 5 years. 5 years since the Galactic Council had laughed humanity out of their chambers like unwanted children at a grown-up's table. 5 years since they'd learned that in the cold vastness of space, weakness was a death sentence. Mike's weathered hands gripped the command console as he studied the approaching hegemony fleet. 12 massive dreadnoughts, their hulls scarred from countless raids. Their weapon arrays charged and ready to rain destruction on another defenseless colony. The same story that had played out hundreds of times across the galaxy, while the Council wrung their hands and offered empty condolences. "Sir, incoming transmission from the lead hegemony vessel," reported Lieutenant Lisa Carter, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. Her fingers danced across the communications array with practiced precision. But Mike could see the tension in her shoulders. She'd grown up on one of the Outer Rim colonies. She knew exactly what the hegemony did to populations they conquered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing the grotesque visage of a hegemony commander. Commander Threx's reptilian features twisted into what passed for a grin among his species, revealing rows of serrated teeth designed for tearing flesh. His scaled hide bore the ritual scars of countless victories, and his eyes glowed with the predatory satisfaction of a hunter cornering wounded prey. "Primitive humans," Threx hissed, his voice carrying the arrogance of a species that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. "You will surrender immediately. Standard protocol applies. Half your population will be relocated to serve the hegemony. The other half will be permitted to continue their miserable existence under our protection." Mike felt something cold settle in his chest. Protection. They called it protection when they enslaved entire worlds, stripped planets bare of resources, and left civilizations broken in their wake. The same protection they'd offered to the mining, colony on Kepler 4 to be before they'd worked every man, woman, and child to death in the asteroid fields. "Sir," Lisa whispered, her voice barely audible, "New Austin has 4 million colonists. Men, women, children, families who came out here looking for a better life." Mike's jaw tightened. 4 million souls who'd left Earth seeking opportunity among the stars, only to find themselves face to face with the galaxy's most vicious predators. 4 million people who'd sent desperate pleas to the Galactic Council, only to receive the same response every colony received: thoughts, prayers, a polite suggestion to negotiate. But here's where things get interesting. Because while the Council had been debating and the hegemony had been raiding, humanity had been busy. Not with diplomacy or politics or endless committee meetings. They'd been busy with the one thing humans had always excelled at: turning their anger into action. "Lieutenant Carter," Mike said quietly, his voice carrying an authority that made the entire bridge crew straighten, signaled the fleet. "Operation Reminder is a go." What? Lisa's fingers hesitated over the controls for just a moment. Operation Reminder. They'd trained for this moment for 5 years. But theory was different from reality. She looked at Mike, searching his face for any hint of doubt, any sign that they were making a mistake that would doom humanity forever. "Sir," she said carefully, "once we do this, there's no going back. The galaxy will never see us the same way again." Mike's smile was cold as winter on Pluto. "Good. I'm tired of being underestimated." What happened next defied every law of physics the galaxy thought they knew. The human ships didn't just move, they folded space around them like origami made of starlight. One moment they were distant specks on the tactical display. The next, they were everywhere at once, appearing and disappearing like ghosts dancing. Between dimensions, the retribution itself seemed to phase in and out of reality, its whole shimmering with energy patterns that made the eyes water to look at directly. Around it, the rest of the human fleet executed maneuvers that should have been impossible, their formations shifting through space-time like sharks cutting through water. "This is impossible," screamed Commander Threx as his flagship systems began failing one by one. His scaled hands flew across his command console, desperately trying to understand what was happening. They were defenseless 5 years ago. They had chemical rockets and kinetic weapons. This technology doesn't exist. The energy weapons that erupted from the human vessels carved through hegemony shields like laser scalpels through tissue paper. But here's the thing, and this is where the hegemony made their fatal mistake. The weapons weren't designed to destroy. They were designed to disable, to capture, to send a message that would echo across the galaxy. 5 years, Mike's voice came through the cum system calm and deadly as the void between stars. 5 years of you picking on defenseless colonies while the Council watched from their ivory towers. 5 years of us preparing for this moment. The hegemony fleet, which had moments before been advancing with the confidence of apex predators, suddenly found themselves completely helpless. Their weapon systems shut down one by one, their engines went dark, and their communication arrays fell silent. Not destroyed, simply, turned off, like someone had flipped a switch. But that wasn't the most terrifying part. The most terrifying part was what happened next. Without warning, the entire hegemony fleet began to move. Not under their own power, they had no power. They were being transported, folded through space like packages being delivered to a cosmic post office. Within minutes, 12 massive dreadnoughts and their crews found themselves floating in empty space. Millions of miles from any inhabited system, their weapon systems weren't just disabled, they were gone, erased from existence as if they'd never been installed. Their crews weren't dead, they were unconscious, sleeping peacefully in their bunks while automated systems maintained life support. "Tell your masters," Mike broadcasted to the drifting ships, his voice carrying across the vastness of space, that humanity formally requests immediate reconsideration for Council membership. "We'll be waiting." The silence that followed was deafening. Across the galaxy, monitoring stations and communication arrays crackled with impossible energy readings. The hegemony, the terror of the Outer Rim, had been neutralized without a single shot being fired in anger, and in the deepest chambers of the Galactic Council, Ancient beings who had ruled the galaxy for millennia suddenly realized that they had severely underestimated the species they dismissed as primitive. The humans weren't just back, they were announcing their presence with the kind of authority that couldn't be ignored. The age of human weakness was over. The age of human strength had begun with a whisper that would soon become a roar. Just like compound interest transforms small investments into massive fortunes. Humanity had been compounding their capabilities in secret for 5 years. If you want to discover how this same principle of exponential growth can transform your own life, check out our next video about the incredible power of compounding it. The same force that just shifted the balance of power in the galaxy. The emergency alarm that pierced through the Galactic Council headquarters hadn't sounded in over 3 centuries. The last time was during the Great Collapse, when an entire star system had been consumed by a rogue black hole. But this alarm wasn't signaling a natural disaster, it was announcing something far more terrifying. The complete upending of galactic order. Counselor Vextar's 6 arms trembled as she materialized in the emergency chamber. Her usual predatory composure shattered like glass. Around her, representatives from 47 species flickered into existence through quantum teleportation. Their various forms of panic, creating a cacophony of alien distress. The chamber itself seemed to pulse with anxiety bioluminescent. Walls flickered erratically, gravity fields fluctuated, and the air itself crackled with nervous energy. "Report," Vextar commanded, but her voice lacked its usual authority. For the first time in her 600-year lifespan, she sounded afraid. The holographic displays around the chamber came alive with impossible data. Battle reports, energy, readings, tactical analyses, all painting a picture that defied everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. The numbers were staggering, but it was the pattern that made Vextar's blood run cold. In a single date, when if our Earth's humanity had neutralized 17 hegemony strongholds across 3 sectors. Not attacked, not engaged in battle, neutralized. The difference was terrifying because it implied a level of control that shouldn't exist. "How is this possible?" demanded Council Leader Mordok, his ancient voice shaking with disbelief. Being who had guided galactic policy for over 2 millennia suddenly sounded like a confused child. They were primitive. "We observed their technology ourselves. Crude chemical rockets, basic kinetic weapons, fusion reactors that barely qualified as controlled explosions." The main display shifted to show comparative analysis. 5 years ago, human ships had been lumbering metal boxes powered by controlled nuclear fusion. Today, they were doing things that violated the fundamental laws of physics, not bending the rules, breaking them completely, and writing new ones. "The analysis is conclusive," reported the Council's chief strategist. A crystalline being whose fragments were crackling with nervous energy. Each crack in his surface sent prismatic light dancing across the chamber walls. Their ships phased through normal space-time as if dimensional barriers don't exist. Their weapons operate on principles we don't understand. They're manipulating matter at the quantum level in ways our best scientists say is impossible. But here's the part that really terrified the Council, and this is where everything gets interesting. Humans weren't just demonstrating impossible technology, they were demonstrating something far more dangerous: perfect restraint. "Here." "Not killing," the strategist continued, his voice barely above a whisper. 17 strongholds, thousands of hegemony vessels, millions of crew members, not a single fatality. They're demonstrating restraint we've never seen from a species. This powerful? The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in like lead weights in water. Throughout galactic history, power had always corrupted. The moment a species developed overwhelming military capability, they used it to dominate others. As natural as gravity, the strong consumed the weak, the powerful ruled the powerless, but humanity was different. They had the power to annihilate their enemies, but they were choosing not to. They were sending a message that was more terrifying than any threat. "We can do anything we want to you, but we choose not to." Council Leader Mordok's ancient form shuddered as he processed the reports. "They've become the most dangerous force in the galaxy overnight. A species we dismissed as worthless has somehow evolved into something that could end galactic civilization with a thought. The silence that followed was broken by the chamber's AI, its voice carrying the weight of cosmic significance. Incoming. Transmission. Priority Alpha. Source. Admiral Jake Martinez, formerly Ambassador, now commanding the human fleet. Vexstar's 6 arms froze mid-gesture. Jake Martinez. The same human they'd humiliated 5 years ago. It's the desperate diplomat they'd laughed out of the chamber like an unwanted pest. The man who'd stood before them in his quaint little uniform, clutching his pathetic application like a child with a crayon drawing. On screen, Mordock commanded, his voice barely audible. Jake's image materialized in the center of the chamber, but this wasn't the same man they remembered. The desperate diplomat was gone, replaced by something that radiated quiet authority, like a star radiates heat. His uniform was different, not the formal dress of a politician, but the practical gear of a commander who'd seen action. Behind him, partially visible in the shadows, stood officers whose equipment seemed to bend reality around them. The transformation was stunning. 5 years ago, Jake had been a supplicant begging for acceptance. Today, he was a force of nature barely contained in human form. His eyes held the same intelligence they remembered, but now it was tempered with something that made even ancient beings like Mordock step back. Absolute confidence. Honorable Council, Jake began, his voice carrying across the stunned silence. With the authority of someone who no longer needed to ask for anything, humanity wishes to discuss our membership application. I trust you've reviewed our recent ... qualifications. The fear in the chamber was palpable, thick enough to cut with a knife. These were beings who had ruled the galaxy for millennia, who had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations, who had weathered cosmic storms and survived the heat death of stars. And they were terrified of a species that had been using stone tools just a few thousand years ago. But you want to know the most terrifying part? Jake was smiling. Not the desperate, hopeful smile of a diplomat seeking favor, but the quiet, confident smile of someone who held all the cards and was about to reveal his hand. I imagine you have questions, Jake continued, his voice carrying just a hint of amusement. About our technological advancement, our strategic capabilities, our intentions. Allow me to address them in order. Vexstar tried to speak, but no words came. Her 6 arms, which had once gestured dismissively at human achievements, now trembled with the realization that humanity had become something unprecedented in galactic history. First, Jake said, his image flickering slightly, as if the very laws of physics were struggling to contain his presence. You want to know how we developed such advanced technology so quickly? The answer is simple. You taught us that strength is the only currency the universe respects. So we became strong. The chamber erupted in whispers, clicks, and alien sounds of distress. They were witnessing the birth of a new galactic superpower, forged in the fires of their own arrogance and tempered by 5 years of absolute determination. Second, Jake continued, his voice cutting through the chaos, you want to know our intentions. Are we here to conquer? To dominate? To become the very thing we once feared? The silence that followed was deafening. Every being in the chamber held their breath, waiting for Jake's answer. The fate of galactic civilization hung in the balance, and they all knew it. Jake's smile widened, and for a moment, he looked almost human again. We're here to do what you never could. Bring justice to the galaxy, starting with the hegemony and ending with a new age of peace through strength. The implications hit the chamber like a shockwave. Humanity wasn't just back, they were announcing their intention to reshape the galaxy according to their own vision of justice. Just like compound interest transforms small investments into massive fortunes over time, humanity had been compounding their capabilities in secret for 5 years. If you want to discover how this same principle of exponential growth can transform your own life, check out our next video about the incredible power of compounding. It's the same force that just announced humanity's arrival as a galactic superpower. The weight of Jake's words settled over the Galactic Council chamber like a suffocating blanket. The man who had once begged for humanity's acceptance now stood before them as judge, jury, and executioner of the old galactic order. His presence filled the vast space with an authority that made even the most ancient beings feel small and vulnerable. "We never wanted to be your enemy," Admiral Jake continued, his words cutting through the council's shocked silence like a blade through silk. Each syllable carried the weight of 5 years of preparation. 5 years of watching helplessly as innocent worlds burned while the council wrung their hands in endless debate. "We wanted to be your partners. But partnership requires mutual respect, and respect, we've learned, must be earned through strength." The transformation in Jake's bearing was complete. Gone was the desperate diplomat who had clutched humanity's application like a lifeline. In his place stood a man who had learned the galaxy's hardest lesson, that power was the only language the universe truly understood. His uniform bore the insignia of rank earned through action, not politics, and his eyes held the cold fire of someone who had stared into the abyss and emerged stronger behind him. The massive holographic display flickered to life, showing a real-time map of the galaxy that made every council member's blood run cold. The three-dimensional projection stretched across the chamber, each star system pulsing with data that revealed the true scope of humanity's operation. Red markers indicated every world currently under hegemony occupation, over 300. Systems where billions of beings lived in fear and slavery. But as they watched in stunned silence, something impossible began to happen. The red markers started turning blue one by one, like dominoes falling in a cosmic chain reaction.
Not randomly, systematically.
Each transformation represented a world liberated, a population freed, a hegemony stronghold neutralized with the same surgical precision they'd witnessed at New Austin. The hegemony has terrorized this galaxy for centuries while you debated and delayed. Jake's voice carried an edge of barely contained fury that made the crystalline walls of the chamber vibrate with harmonic resonance. Today, their reign of terror ends. Every world they've conquered is now under human protection. The scope of the operation was staggering. In real time, they were watching humanity dismantle an empire that had taken the hegemony 6 centuries to build.
300
worlds, billions of lives, all being liberated simultaneously with a coordination that defied comprehension. How many ships did humanity have? How many soldiers? How had they managed to keep this force hidden for 5 years? Counselor Vextar's 6 arms trembled as she struggled to maintain some semblance of authority. Her species had ruled through fear and intimidation for millennia, but now she was facing something that made her own predatory nature seem quaint by comparison. You cannot simply impose your will on the galaxy. The Council has maintained order for the Council. Jake interrupted, his voice carrying the finality of a judge passing sentence. Had the chance to stop this decades ago. You chose politics over justice. We choose action over words. Chamber erupted in panicked clicking and chittering as species representatives realized their comfortable order was crumbling around them. The beings who had once laughed at humanity's weakness now faced the terrifying reality that they had awakened something far more dangerous than any military force: human determination, backed by overwhelming technological superiority. But Jake wasn't finished. He never was when it came to making a point that needed to be made. "Here's what's going to happen," he continued, his calm tone more terrifying than any threat could ever be. It was the voice of someone who had already won, who was simply explaining the new reality to those too slow to understand it. Humanity will receive full council membership with all rights and privileges. In return, we will serve as the enforcement arm you've always needed, but never had the courage to create. The implications hit the chamber like a shockwave. Humanity wasn't just demanding membership, they were announcing their intention to become the galaxy's police force. The species that had been dismissed as primitive was now offering to take on the role the Council had abdicated through centuries of inaction. Dr. Emily Harrison stepped forward beside Jake, and the sight of her sent another wave of shock through the assembly. The brilliant scientist who had once clutched humanity's application with trembling hands now wore Admiral's insignia that seemed to shimmer with the same reality-bending energy that surrounded all the human technology. Her transformation was as complete as Jake's, from desperate supplicant to confident commander. Every species in this chamber has called for justice at some point, Emily said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 5 years preparing for this moment. Your worlds have been raided, your people enslaved, your resources stripped bare, while the council offered thoughts and prayers. Today, you get justice. The question is, will you embrace it, or will you stand in its way? The silence that followed, stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. The assembled representatives found themselves facing an impossible choice. Accept humanity's offer and acknowledge their own failures. Or resist and face the consequences of opposing a species that had just dismantled the galaxy's most feared empire in a single day. But here's the thing about ultimatums, and this is where Jake showed his true strategic brilliance. He wasn't just offering the council a choice between acceptance and resistance. He was offering them a choice between relevance and obsolescence. Let me be perfectly clear, Jake said, his image flickering slightly, as if the very fabric of space-time was struggling to contain his presence. This isn't a negotiation. This is a notification. The age of passive observation is over. The age of active protection begins now, with or without your approval. A holographic display behind him shifted to show the final statistics of operation. Reminder: 300 worlds liberated, 0 casualties. The hegemony's entire military force disabled and relocated to uninhabited systems, where they could contemplate their crimes in isolation. It was a demonstration of power so overwhelming that resistance seemed not just futile, but insane. You have 2 choices, Emily added, her voice carrying the weight of 5 years of preparation. Join us in building a galaxy where justice isn't just a concept debated in comfortable chambers, or watch from the sidelines as we do it without you. The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was different. This wasn't the stunned silence of shock, it was the heavy silence of beings, grappling with the end of everything they'd known. The galactic order that had existed for millennia was dying, and something new was being born in its place. Council. Leader Mordok's ancient form trembled as he processed the magnitude of what he was witnessing. Humanity had just announced the dawn of a new age, and they were offering the Council the chance to be part of it rather than victims of it. The question hanging in the air was simple. Would the galaxy's oldest powers accept the leadership of its newest, just like compound interest? Transforms small investments into massive fortunes over time. Humanity had been compounding their capabilities in secret for 5 years. If you want to discover how the same principle of exponential growth can transform your own life, I'll check out our next video about the incredible power of compounding it. The same force that just rewrote the rules of galactic civilization, the ancient mechanisms of the Galactic Council chamber hummed with an energy that hadn't been felt in over a millennium. Council leader Mordok's crystalline form, which had weathered the rise and fall of countless civilizations, trembled as he processed the impossible situation unfolding before him. The being who had guided galactic policy for over 2,000 years suddenly found himself witnessing the end of everything he'd known. The humans weren't just demanding membership. They were announcing a fundamental shift in galactic power that would echo through the cosmos for eons to come. The comfortable age of endless debate, of committees forming subcommittees to discuss the formation of other committees, was over. Dead. Buried beneath the weight of human determination and technological superiority. Around the chamber, representatives from 47 species engaged in frantic telepathic communication. The crystalline beings flickered with nervous energy, their light patterns creating a chaotic dance of fear and confusion. The energy-based entities pulsed with frequencies that made the chamber's walls vibrate, while the towering mechanical representatives processed data at speeds that overloaded their systems. The vote is unanimous, Mordok announced after what felt like an eternity, but was actually only 17 seconds of telepathic conference. His voice carried the weight of cosmic significance. This wasn't just a membership vote. It was the formal recognition of a new galactic superpower. Humanity is welcomed as a full member of the Galactic Council, with all rights and privileges therein. Jake nodded curtly, his expression revealing nothing of the satisfaction he must have felt. 5 years ago, he'd been a desperate diplomat begging for scraps of recognition. Today, he was accepting membership as an equal among beings who had ruled the galaxy since before human civilization existed. Excellent. Our first order of business: the hegemony's leadership will stand trial for crimes against galactic civilization. We've already secured their command structure. They're waiting in our holding facilities. The chamber buzzed with nervous energy that was almost electric. The implications were staggering. In one day, humans had accomplished what the Council had failed to do in centuries. The hegemony, which had terrorized the galaxy for 600 years, had been neutralized, captured, and prepared for justice in less than 24 hours. But here's what really terrified the Council members, and this is where the true scope of human preparation became clear. Jake wasn't announcing a future plan. He was reporting completed actions. The trials weren't something humanity hoped to conduct. They were something they were ready to conduct immediately. "How?" whispered Counselor Vexstar, her 6 arms trembling as her earlier arrogance crumbled into genuine fear. "How did you become so powerful so quickly? 5 years ago, you were using chemical rockets and kinetic weapons. Today, you're manipulating space-time itself." Admiral Emily Harrison stepped forward, her smile cold as the void between stars. The brilliant scientist who had once clutched humanity's application with shaking hands now radiated the confidence of someone who had helped orchestrate the greatest military operation in galactic history. "You taught us that strength is the only currency the galaxy respects, so we became strong. 5 years of unity, purpose, and absolute determination to never be dismissed again." The transformation in Emily was as complete as Jake's gone was. The desperate academic seeking validation from alien peers. In her place stood a strategic mastermind who had helped humanity leapfrog millennia of technological development in half a decade. Her uniform bore the insignia of someone who had earned rank through results, not politics. 5 years, she continued, her voice carrying the authority of absolute certainty. 5 years of every human scientist, engineer, and researcher working toward a single goal: ensuring we would never be powerless again. 5 years of turning our anger into innovation, our humiliation into determination. Captain Mike Thompson's voice crackled through the comm system from the human fleet, his words carrying across the chamber with the satisfaction of a job well done. "All hegemony forces have surrendered. Refugee worlds are being liberated as we speak. The galaxy is finally safe." The reports flowing in were overwhelming. 300 worlds freed from slavery, billions of beings liberated from oppression, entire star systems breathing free for the first time in centuries. All accomplished with surgical precision and zero casualties, a demonstration of power so overwhelming that it redefined what galactic civilization thought was possible. Jake looked around the chamber at the assembled species representatives, beings who had once laughed at humanity's weakness with the casual cruelty of gods mocking mortals. Now they sat in stunned silence, grappling with the reality that the species they'd dismissed as primitive had become the most powerful force in the galaxy. "The age of passive observation is over," Jake announced, his voice carrying the finality of a judge passing sentence on the old order. "Age of active protection begins now. No more committees to discuss committees, no more debates while worlds burn. Justice will be swift, decisive, and absolute." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The galactic order that had existed for millennia was being replaced by something entirely new, a system where actions mattered more than words, where justice was delivered rather than debated, where the strong protected the weak instead of exploiting them. As the session ended, Counselor Vexstar couldn't shake the terrifying realization that the galaxy had just learned a fundamental truth that would reshape every aspect of interstellar relations. Sometimes the most dangerous predator is the one that appears harmless until it decides to remind you that appearances can be deceiving. The last transmission from Admiral Jake echoed through the chamber with the weight of prophecy. "We look forward to a more peaceful galaxy, one way or another." Those final words weren't a threat, they were a promise. Humanity would bring peace to the galaxy through strength, through justice, through the simple recognition that some things were worth fighting for. The age of humanity had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. The old order was dead. The new order was being born in the fires of human determination. And every being in the galaxy would soon learn that when humans set their minds to something, they didn't just succeed, they redefined what success meant. The transformation was complete. The dismissal had become dominance. The joke had become the punchline that ended an age. Just like compound interest transforms small investments into massive fortunes over time, humanity had been compounding their capabilities in secret for 5 years. If you want to discover how this same principle of exponential growth can transform your own life, check out our next video about the incredible power of compounding. It's the same force that just crowned humanity as the galaxy's new guardians.